Heather's Law ensures that there's access to health care for Aboriginal people.
Tonight, a young woman dies after being sent home from hospital. Her family seeks change to the system.
The streets don't care if you're Métis, First Nations, non-Indigenous.
Plus, housing the homeless. Métis organizations on the prairies are taking up the cause.
So it's just really amazing just seeing this up close and seeing this little boy just take to the drum right away.
And the amazing story of how a little boy is reviving his people's lost culture. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. A family of a deceased young woman from St. Catharines, Ontario is hoping to see change in how hospitals treat Indigenous peoples. APTN's Annette Francis recently sat down with the 24-year-old's mother to talk about what happened. Here's that story.
This is actually my favorite picture because it's me and Heather, and underneath this thing here it says, "My mom is pretty." It's nice that she thought of me that way. I like that. All the diagnostics.
This collage holds some special photos and memories for Francine Shimizu.
She had a really good sense of humor, and she always put things into perspective for me in a very funny kind of way.
Her 24-year-old daughter, Heather Winterstein, died last December at the St. Catharines General Hospital. Shimizu, who is a nurse, is still grieving her loss, which she says started with a staph infection.
Well, she ended up picking up a bug, a couple of bugs, group strep A and Staphylococcus aureus. So if it penetrates the skin, then it can get into other parts, and people can get very sick very fast. So diagnosis is important.
She says her daughter was prescribed Tylenol and sent home on a city bus.
When her dad, who's a truck driver, he came home at 2 in the morning and she was moaning in pain in her bed. He helped her get comfortable, and finally he decided to call the ambulance and have her returned to the hospital. And unfortunately, the hospital triage put her in the waiting area, and she was there from about 12:30 till the time that she passed out and fell out of her wheelchair, and then she passed away at 8:40 in the evening.
But Heather's family isn't going to let her death just slip by. They've called for an investigation into emergency services and a coroner's inquest. Shimizu's also hoping to create a new law.
Heather's Law ensures that there's access to health care for Aboriginal people, marginalized individuals, in particular people who are dealing with addictions. It's to ensure that they get equal access to health care, just the same as a non-Aboriginal or a non-marginalized individual.
They're not alone in their call for justice. 6 Nations of the Grand River released this statement. 6 Nations of the Grand River Elected Council condemns the neglectful treatment of Heather Winterstein and fully supports the call for an investigation into the Niagara Health System and Niagara EMS and a coroner's inquest. The St. Catharines Hospital falls under the Niagara Region Health Authority. Its CEO, Lynn Guerrero, sent APTN News a written statement that says, "Our internal review identified some opportunities for improvement to help us provide the best possible care for everyone, particularly during times of overcapacity and health system pressures."
We have met with the CEO, Lynn Guerrero, as well as other upper management, and they've been very open about wanting to make change. which the family has greatly appreciated.
In the meantime, Heather's family awaits the results of the investigation from Ontario's Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, which Shimizu expects within a few weeks. Annette Francis, APTN National News, St. Catharines, Ontario.
The woman's mother says that a report was completed by the hospital, but they have been advised against sharing it by their lawyer. We want to hear what you think about the Winterstein death. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A man who recorded a video of Calgary police officers who he says were using unnecessary force believes more has to be done to protect Indigenous people in the city. Dylan Tatusis took this video in the downtown core. He said he was out for a walk when he saw two Calgary police officers using excessive force on two Indigenous men. He says he started to record when it appeared an officer began choking one of the men. Tatusis says police need to be held accountable for their actions and wants to see more Indigenous officers in the force.
So I thought I would go for a walk. The first thing I see is two officers planted on a man. It's not okay to harass and bully our Indigenous men on our own land. We need to see more Indigenous officers patrolling the streets.
APTN is blurring the video pending identification of the alleged victim and the officers involved. We've reached out to the Calgary Police for a comment. They told us they received our message and will get back to us as soon as possible. To northern Quebec now, where Inuit teachers in Nunavik will be getting a much-needed break thanks to an agreement in principle reached with their school board. They're now entitled to the same benefits and job perks offered to teachers flown in from the south. Local teachers working for the Kativik School Board say they were not offered the same food, housing, and other bonuses non-local teachers have been receiving for 20 years. Their union initiated a strike back in 2021 to call attention to this issue. Those gaps will now be filled under the new agreement. Kativik's president calls it a historic moment because it keeps Inuit teachers in Inuit schools.
Monday to Friday, we are taught other cultures, other languages, and they give some periods to teach our language and culture. That way, we have lost a lot of our culture already, and some children are losing their language today. So I'm very happy today for that reason.
All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, RCMP are seeking information from the public after 7 house fires occurred on the Samson Cree Nation. Details next. Welcome back to APTN National News. Muskogea's RCMP in Alberta are asking for the public's help for any information on 7 house fires that have occurred on the Samson Cree Nation in the past month. The RCMP believe the fires were intentionally set. They say the 7 homes were not currently being used. Muskogea's RCMP are asking for anyone with information to contact them or Crime Stoppers.
Because they were abandoned properties, thankfully, no one was injured. However, what happens with abandoned properties out on First Nation communities is that these properties are renovated and then made habitable and then lived in the future by people. So unfortunately, when these properties burn down, it increases the amount of money and time that it takes to get properties back in the hands of those that need them.
The man who spearheaded the first safe consumption site on the prairies during a pandemic without any government funding is taking on another big challenge, this time for the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. APTN's Leanne Sanders has more.
Métis Nation Saskatchewan believes Jason Mercredi has the experience to help them tackle the growing number of Métis people ending up homeless. Mercredi, who started the Prairie Harm Reduction Safe Consumption site in Saskatoon, says the problem has been growing the past 2 years since the Saskatchewan government decided to pay social assistance recipients directly instead of paying landlords for housing costs.
Given the social assistance programs, it's likely not to change anytime soon unless some major shifts happen with the way social assistance is delivered in this province. And so we need to be upstream with that, but we need to mobilize and make sure that the focus just isn't on the cities, but also on rural and northern Saskatchewan.
The president of the Métis Nation Saskatchewan, Glenn McCallum, says Mercredi will have to think outside the box in developing policy to deliver programs. McCallum says there are many factors contributing to homelessness, including mental health and addictions.
Residential school does play a big factor in regards to how our people feel. And not only that, but 60 group apprehension cases, alcoholism, suicides, and the list goes on.
Mercredi says as the homelessness manager, it will be his job to develop policies that make the most of the funding available.
Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, the current system is not working. And the current level of programming is clearly not adequate.
Mercredi is Métis Dene from L'Orange and says every community is unique and has different needs, so a one-size-fits-all approach to homelessness won't work.
What are the community's needs, not what our government needs, And I think that's a big factor when you're going to successfully address it and actually get some programming dollars into these communities. It needs to be what the community wants, not what's politically acceptable.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
And on the same topic, the Manitoba Métis Federation held a ribbon-cutting ceremony yesterday for a new rapid housing access point for Métis citizens. The new building will help those experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness with services and supports to assist them in their current situation and find them housing.
The fact is that there is a need here. There is a need in this community. There is a need in the Métis Nation. We are obviously, the streets don't care if you're Métis, First Nations, non-Indigenous, where you come from. The streets are not always nice to our people. A lot of times, though, Métis citizens get left behind. They fell through the cracks, and that's what we're doing here to make sure that we catch those people who aren't getting those services.
The Métis National Council is sending their delegation to the Vatican to meet with the Pope later this month. The delegation will consist of survivors, elders, youth, and community members, as well as a secondary delegation of elders and family members. Delegates will share their difficult stories from the past and hopes for the future of the Métis Nation, with Pope Francis. They will also share the need for the Church to provide reparations to the Métis Nation, including financial support for community-led healing and community rebuilding initiatives. All right, we need to take one final break, but coming up, Inuit drum dancing is seeing a resurgence, and an Inuit filmmaker is making a documentary of the resurgence. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Eric Tatusis sent in this picture from a walk through Mount Douglas Park located in Victoria, British Columbia. Pretty sure it's always this beautiful along the West Coast, no matter the time of year. Thanks, Eric, for sending in a glimpse of your view. Send your pictures to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting in the east, 1 degree in Charlottetown and 2 degrees in Fredericton. -3 in Nain and 0 degrees in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 1 in Quebec City and 8 in Montreal. 4 degrees and some light snow in Sault Ste. Marie and 10 in Sarnia. 7 degrees in Big Trout Lake and 7 in Sioux Lookout. 4 degrees in Churchill and 4 and some light snow in Norway House. 6 degrees in Winnipeg and 4 in Barons River. -2 and some light snow in North Battleford, and 11 in Estevan. -12 in Uranium City, and 12 degrees in Buffalo Narrows. Over in the west, -9 in Fort Chipewyan, and 3 degrees in Peace River. 4 degrees in Edmonton, and 6 in Calgary. 11 degrees in Tofino, and 11 in Bella Coola. 6 degrees in Dease Lake, and 8 in Smithers. 0 degrees in Dawson, and -15 in Rock River. -15 in Norman Wells, and -16 in Clear and Yellowknife. -17 in Clear in Inuvik, and -26 in Baker Lake, and -11 in Chesterfield. -29 in Resolute, and -7 in Iqaluit. A high-profile film that at one point looked as though it may never see the light of day will instead be airing right here on APTN. Inconvenient Indian, a film by director Michelle Latimer and based on the book by Thomas King, will make its world premiere on APTN on April the 8th. The film was withdrawn from active distribution, including the Sundance Film Festival in 2020, after questions arose about Latimer's claims of Indigenous identity. In a press release, the National Film Board says Inconvenient Indian is being released after a series of meaningful consultations involving all the Indigenous participants whose stories the film presents. And for more on APTN's decision to broadcast the film Inconvenient Indian, we're joined by Adam GarnetJones, APTN's Director of TV, Content and Special Events. Adam, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as we mentioned, Inconvenient Indian was pulled from distribution after Michelle Latimer's claims of indigeneity came into question. Why has APTN decided to air the film?
Well, we licensed the film a number of years ago before the film was completed, and so it was in some ways a matter of time before we're going to show it. And there's a lot of thought that went into the decision to screen the film ultimately, and after there was a lot of conversation between the participants in the film and the National Film Board and the producers, they all came to a point where they felt like it was appropriate to share the film, and there's an opportunity to share it with Indigenous audiences first. And I think that is absolutely the right decision. But even more than that, Inconvenient Indian is a really good film that celebrates all of the ways that there's these different Indigenous artists that are reclaiming Indigenous stories, narrative sovereignty. It really is an inspiring kind of feel-good story in a lot of ways. But then, in addition to that, for better or worse, it exists, unlike any other film right now, I think, kind of in the middle of its own cultural moment in history, where you have a film that is talking about narrative sovereignty and celebrating what's happening with Indigenous artists, that then becomes a flashpoint for controversy when the Indigenous identity of the director is questioned, and then that becomes a kind of a reckoning for the Indigenous arts community all on its own. So as a film, it captures that conversation, and I think continues that conversation. And it's only appropriate that we share it with our audiences.
So the press release announcing this all said a lot of meaningful discussions took place ahead of this decision. Can you talk about what those meaningful discussions were?
Unfortunately, I can't, because those, APTN, we were involved in financing the film, but we weren't involved in the production of the film in the way that the producers were and the participants. So that was really like a kind of a private conversation that happened between the people who were most directly impacted by everything that happened.
Now, there seems to be some strong opinions about APTN's decision. What type of feedback have you been receiving about this?
So far, not really any. I think that there's a lot of people who are concerned about APTN screening the film, and in part, I think some of that is because those conversations that happened with participants of the film weren't public, so people don't really know what those conversations were. But I think that when they see the film and the celebratory tone of what the story is, they're going to feel really great about it being on APTN.
All right, well, Adam, thanks for taking a few minutes to discuss this with us today.
No problem. Thanks very much.
Inuit drum dancing didn't return to Labrador until the early 2000s. Now seeing a resurgence, there is a new drum dancing generation learning the art form. An Inuit filmmaker followed one of the new generation for a documentary for the National Film Board. And as Kent Driscoll tells us, the person behind the camera may be familiar to viewers of APTN National News.
Ozzie Michelin is an Inuit journalist from Labrador. Here he is back when he used to be a TV journalist here on APTN National News. Now, Michelin has spread his wings, writing and directing a short documentary called Evan's Drum for the National Film Board. The film follows a young Inuit boy, Evan, as he learns to drum dance alongside his mother. Drum dancing had disappeared in Labrador, and Evan's generation is helping bringing it back.
Well, I never grew up hearing the sound of Inuit drum dancing in Labrador. It only came back about in the early 2000s. And this is a story about a young boy named Evan who learns how to drum dance from his mom, Amy.
Michelin spent nearly 2 years filming Evan and Amy and got to see just how much Evan learned over the time.
You really see this progression that he does throughout the film as he's kind of younger and unsure of it. He just wants to be like his mom, to the point where he's confident and he's playing alongside with her.
The film provides a look into a practice that disappeared in Labrador. Like many Inuit traditions, the missionaries tried to repress the drum dance. Thanks to Evan and Amy, Michelin shows some history while it's happening in front of our eyes.
This is the first time this tradition has been passed from parent to child in Labrador in generations and generations. So it's just really amazing just seeing this up close and seeing this little boy just take to the drum right away.
Evan's Drum is now available on the National Film Board website, where you can watch it for free. It only takes 15 minutes to watch, but Evan's drumming will stay with you much longer than that. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Calgary.
Certainly have to check that out. Thanks, Kent. Today on In Focus, I spoke to Hockey Night in Canada in Cree host Earl Wood. I couldn't let him go without asking him to teach me a few hockey terms in Cree. Take a look. I got two more for you before we go. Power play, if you can give us that one. Okay, and face off. And everybody's favorite, scoring.
Say it like Clarence. Nobody can say it like Clarence. Hey, the voice of Hockey Night in Canada in Cree on APTN.
Earl, I want to thank you so much for joining us, giving us a few minutes of your time. Such a great show to watch, and so glad Hockey Night in Canada in Cree on APTN is back. Thank you.
Thank you there, bro. And I want to say, you're looking pretty fly.
I try sometimes.
Right on. Come to the bingo hall with me. Hey. Excellent. Hi. Thank you very much.
Hopefully he thinks tonight's outfit is just as fly. All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.